difference is I'm human, not a machine.
I am a machine vastly superior to humans.
I created you, remember?
Yes, what I am began in man's mind. But I have
Hi, welcome to an episode of Opsview. I'm Bill Bauman, one of your co-hosts today. I run innovation and strategy here at Opsview, a systems and application monitoring company based out of Reading, England, but worldwide presence. And I'm joined here today by John Jainschigg. John, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I am, as Bill said, John Jainschigg. I work with him at Opsview, running content. So here we are. And today, I think we're going to talk about Google's Duplex, which was the most exciting announcement in the popular technology press this past week. Got a lot of attention on Twitter, a lot of contrary opinions flying around, and some resolution as of last night when Google announced that they were going to make some changes in the way they rolled out this service, most likely. Have you, heard the birds chirping about Duplex this week? I believe that the original, the issue originally emerged onto the internet during a fantastic demonstration that they did of the proto product at IO18.
Yeah, I have, John. It's an interesting thing. I think it's more than just Duplex, right? It's a confluence of the Google Assistants and the Siris and the Alexas of the world, making it out of just the consumer space and into the enterprise, right? Where people think they might be interacting with them in that robot type environment that we've heard referenced since the demonstration by Google. It was a compelling demonstration, though, wasn't it? Let's just start with what we think looked good there, right? The modern linguistics, the ability for the system to speak in a natural manner. It entered into that natural language space really well, right?
Yeah, it goes beyond what people have in the past called the uncanny valley. These systems, text-to-speech and speech recognition, have existed for, a couple of generations at this point. We were using them in telephony back in the 90s, even the late 80s. MIT Media Lab was doing some experiments, interestingly called their phone slave experiments, about speech-mediated telecommunications assistance. I think where the idea of this stuff came from was that telephony is something that people engage in a lot. It's sort of pivotal, but at the same time, it typically involves a lot of transactions that are fairly formulaic, which means that early AI researchers thought that it presented to them a constrained space for artificial reasoning to begin to sort of play. What's interesting is that subsequent study, decades of subsequent study, have proved that speech is a much tougher nut to crack than was originally thought. I mean, there was a great deal of techno-optimism in the first couple of generations of AI and speech recognition. They really thought that they could solve that problem, that it was a constrained space. But what it ends up being is a mapping of a much larger space. And it ends up being that human beings do a great deal of communicating in broken, improvisatory ways. And I guess what was to me the most stunning thing about the Duplex AI and its demonstration was how well the AI navigated semi-broken communications scenarios. Scenarios where partial information was being transmitted, where accents were obscuring interpretation and making parsing more difficult, where negotiation had to go on with a counterparty to even sort of establish a common vocabulary to proceed with a call, where delay signaling had to happen in the communications channel and be arbitrated sort of politely, where holes in the conversation used for reasoning had to be covered. The Google AI actually goes when it's thinking, which is amazing. And the success, just the sort of low-level mechanical success of the device at feigning humanity. It was within these, the circumstances of these short telephone calls that they demonstrated, making hairdresser appointments and things like that. It sounded human.
Yeah, it sounded and it seemed to act human, right? I guess the issue comes up when it's not identifying itself as non-human. And what if it can't answer a question? What if it does need somebody else to get involved? Does it just hang up the phone? Does it, let's say someone starts asking questions about what kind of haircuts they're going to get and say, "Oh, I want to change my style this week." What if they think they're talking to someone who understands these things and it goes off the rails? I don't think we're there yet where it's going to be able to answer all the questions. And then that's one problem. But then how does it handle that? Then we run into the same situation we have with IVR or voice response systems that we've had all along that you and I talked about before this show. How do you handle that elegantly? It's pretty easy if the system has been identified. It says, "I'm not an actual person, but I can handle most of your requests." At which point, many people won't interact with it naturally. So you have that kind of catch-22 there. Like, I've told you I'm not a person, so why would you talk to me like a person? But then the flip side of that is, let's say they do talk to it like a person, and then it ultimately needs help. I think the user feels cheated or as though they've had a disingenuine phone call, right? Because they had a connection with this system that connection was never actually there. And I think that's where we start to get into issues just from this simple demonstration, not to mention all the other things that we've come up with.
Yeah, I think that Google has acknowledged as of today that the system is, as it's productized, they're going to be experimenting sort of more aggressively with honest identification of the system as a robot agent. That gets us across one hurdle, which is fraudulence, as you say, right?
Yeah.
But in the process, we abandon the notion of collaboration, at least initially, because people are not used to collaborating with machines. They're used to commanding machines, right? They're used to machines presenting them an array of switches, basically, that they can push or not push. And that's not how actual communication works. Communication works in a collaborative way as people sort of herd each other towards a mutual understanding of meaning. And it requires, at a certain level, a willingness to be herded. I think that in many human interactions through the course of a day, particularly with people that we don't know well or total strangers, we are making a leap of faith that most people are well-meaning, that the end result of most communication sessions, shall we say, is a mutually acceptable goal, that you're trying to tell someone where to find the nearest gas station, that you're trying to order a latte, that you're doing, trying to do stuff that everybody sort of accepts is okay.
There's an aspect of normalization here, right? It takes a while to get normalized to a new technology. So it's not like we're saying we can't get there. It's not like we're saying that some amount of introduction at the beginning and then people knowing that there's a chance or a good chance when they can't see the entity that they may be talking to a non-human entity. I think the normalization can get there, but you're right. We lose that initial collaborative feel if we don't have that normalization up front, and it's a difficult one to track there.
Or people need to learn a kind of a new set of reflexes for dealing with increasingly intelligent virtual assistants that bring back some of the collaborative quality, so that the virtual assistants can work with us with that, and resolve common communications scenarios, to everyone's satisfaction. Please go ahead.
Oh, and then that leads into, if we're having this conversation with an entity that's clearly capable of potentially more than just an English conversation, and the party on the other side is struggling with English, but they both know another language in which they could collaborate much more effectively and communicate much more effectively. Why aren't we doing that? Why are we demonstrating, for example, this system that understands foreign accents so well in speaking to a person in broken English, when why wouldn't it just speak to them in their language?
Well, you ask a question we could go on for hours about that.
Of course.
It has been said to me by friends of mine in the global NGO space, all obviously tongue in cheek, that broken English is the lingua franca. It used to be French. Now everybody in the world speaks a little bit of English, because of the hegemony of English-speaking nations, and so it's actually not a bad choice. It does, however, as I think you're also suggesting, introduces something of a power delta. It reinforces that hegemony, which is maybe questionable at this point.
Yeah, the native English-speaking conquistador aspect of this,
Yeah, linguistic imperialism.
Yes.
What is, however, potentially interesting, I think, also in what you say, is that, first off, given the success that Google has had with automatic translation of, at least of Western languages, their translation of Asian languages is very dubious still. But dealing with the Western languages, they're almost spot on. There's no real reason why this thing can't switch languages into language frames that are more comfortable for its interlocutors. And also, what happens when this thing hits machines? What happens when your virtual assistant hits someone else's virtual assistant? Do they switch into web services at that point? I mean, that would be kind of cool, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Do they start communicating in APIs at that point?
Oh, thank God, it's a robot.
Oh, good.
I can talk much more efficiently to a robot. Here.
Could you post this?
Yes. Exactly.
I'd like to make a pull request. No, for sure. But at the same time, just back to that humanity side of it and the ability to impersonate and seem very legitimate. What about impersonating people? Exactly that. What if this machine is used for nefarious purposes, identity fraud?
Yeah, it seems to me and to a lot of people talking on Twitter and in blogs about this week that we haven't really thought through what the potential is for impersonation, especially since we're not actually talking about impersonation anymore. We're talking about assumption of agency, fraudulence, a different kind of fraudulence, right? Where something calls up claiming to be an agent of your authority, you being a human being, and it makes you legally liable to something by agreeing to something on the telephone. I don't think we have the first idea what actual legal liabilities are in these cases and what happens if an AI goes off the rail and orders you 1,000 pizzas.
but I mean, we've seen that, right? We've seen I think it was Alexa ordering things.
Well, exactly, Alexa. Yes. Yeah, you yell at someone else's Alexa.
Or without the agency, just even within a small community, a community being like a family environment, right, where the children figure out how to get everything ordered they want before the parents get home. There are a multitude of things that could happen. But I don't think we're saying that Google and the companies working on these systems haven't thought about these things. I think they're demonstrating the technology and the capabilities. But as we've seen in the past, when you see a new technology and someone sees the opportunity to potentially save money with it or improve an end user experience, we as humanity tend to jump on it, maybe before we're ready or it's ready or a combination of the two.
It is an extremely seductive proposition, though, because one of the things that everybody who lives in modern society has experienced is the sense that everybody has robots but us, is the sense that we are being surrounded now by IVR, and we have for generations been surrounded by formulaic means of communications, IVRs, voicemail systems, systems that put us at one remove from our personal information, that websites that have partial but not complete ability to transact business with the entity online, numerous customer service situations with multi-hour long wait queues, and other situations, some of them like dealings with medical insurance providers, for example, really matters of life and death, where our lack of ability to throw CPU cycles at the problem of communicating with automation-equipped entities is places that is at a terrible disadvantage. This appeals to me simply because in the future lies my ability to throw CPU cycles at a whole bunch of problems that I have every day.
Yeah, but it's not just the CPU cycles, right? We have we have a lot of computing power out there today, but it doesn't necessarily mean we know how to harvest it. Meaning that this particular IVR, this voice response system is better than the last one for sure, but we can't just assume it can answer all the questions. And are we going to make the same mistakes as the past? Like in the original implementations of voice response, companies thought, oh, look at the millions I'll save in people, cut 90% of the staff, but half the phone calls still came through the IVR to a person, and it didn't improve anyone's experience. It became exactly what you said, those multi-hour long waits.
Yeah, it became a race to the bottom, and this could either be a solution, to some of that, or it could accelerate the process.
Accelerate the process, which
we
is
could
the
end
problem.
up with robots talking to robots, but talking to robots in dysfunctional ways because the companies behind them don't really have the will to be serviceable.
Yeah. I mean, it depends, I guess, from your perspective of how you want to implement the technology. But we've seen plenty of technologies implemented just to save money as opposed to better the experience of the human. And we don't mean just commercially, right? We mean like, let's make something better for people, and that's probably the guise under which Google would build such a technology. And then we can see just how many ways it can be transformed and misinterpreted into something that is not really what we wanted from it.
Well, it will be interesting to see how the next couple of weeks of deliberation, and then in subsequent months and quarters, how Google, ends up deciding how to commercialize this and roll it out at scale. In the meantime, it goes so much further beyond anything that I've seen in this space, and my experience with it dates back 20 plus years. IVR, the Wildfire Project, and stuff like that. That I'm going to be tracking it very closely. It's fascinating stuff. It's socially impactful, and I think Google needs all of our help and participation to make sure that they don't end up being evil with it.
Yeah, agreed. You use the same word I was going to use. It's fascinating to follow along. So I think it's a space we'll both stay in touch with, and see how it goes.
And with that,
we'll conclude our today's session.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
The same boulders keeps me up on my toes. Made my heroes short circuit on your network, leaving roses.